Welcome back to the Mobile Hunter Podcast. My name is Josh Luck. I will be your host for this episode, and I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Jacob Sklenar. Jacob, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Josh?
Good. I struggle with these intros.
I know.
I've been recording a lot of episodes lately, trying to get ahead, and some of the redundancy, I'm like, maybe I should change it up and say something else, just something off the wall. I don't know.
Yeah. You got to get something unique in there, really throw the viewers off or something like that.
That's right.
Maybe.
Maybe I'll introduce us as The Price is Right one day or something. Anyway, so we are continuing the Whitetail Apprentice series. This time frame where we're recording this early, but this will come out about mid-October. We're going kind of off script a little bit. Previously, we've had a hunter on that has had consistent success during a certain time period. Now we're kind of currently we're in that middle of the season, kind of the October time frame for our Midwest listeners. For our Southern listeners, probably push that into November. But we're going off script a little bit because we've been following up those episodes with the hunters, with a lot of biologists, and talking about different studies and data. We're still going to talk about data, but we have another hunter on today to discuss that. And that hunter is Mr. Daniel Williams. Daniel, how are you?
Great, man. How you been?
Doing all right.
Been wide open.
Yeah. It's a busy time of year for all of us.
Yep.
Currently, I'm just trying to bust out a lot of these podcasts because we were talking a little bit earlier before we started recording with just some family health stuff going on. By the time this will come out, my wife has a surgery planned and scheduled that will require me to be home quite a bit for the month of October. So trying to record this ahead of time. That way we can focus on what matters, and that's family.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't ever really end when you hunt a lot between hunting, scouting, and doing taxidermy. Like it's a year-round. I don't want to call it a job because it's more of an obsession. It's like you have to do it. Sitting at home stressed out because you didn't scout that week.
Exactly.
But it's that time of year now. I mean, it's do or die time. You got to go.
Exactly. I'll be twiddling my thumbs during the month of October, just like studying trail cam data and just like anxiously waiting to get out for whenever that might be.
Right.
But anyway, so I wanted to have you on today to discuss a topic I find very interesting, and that is historical data. For our listeners, I first heard of Daniel in the Cedar Ridge Chronicles, and we'll get into that stuff shortly. But I think I discovered you, Daniel, a couple years ago, 2 or 3 years ago now. It might have been through the Southern Outdoorsman boys. But it might be close to 2 years now, at least a year and a half ago, you recorded a podcast with Jacob and Andrew that I still consider one of the better podcasts as far as historical data and the actual application of it as a hunter. Right. And this is a time of year where I think that is very valuable to talk about and go over. Personally, for me, this is the time of year where I start looking back at a lot of historical data and trying to plan some things out as far as getting ready for the Midwest, right? Pre-rut kind of end of October into that peak rut time frame, first, second week, third week in some places in November. It can be a very frustrating time, but I think that historical data can help with efficiency with that. So really wanted to dive in to that topic today with you and just kind of discuss how hunters can apply that this season.
Right.
But before we get into some of that, if you could quickly give our listeners a brief background of yourself, kind of who you are, what you do, and a little bit of your hunting history, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm Daniel Williams. I've got the Cedar Ridge Chronicles on social media. Cedar Ridge Whitetails Taxidermy. I do taxidermy full time. I was a meat department manager for 25 years and just started learning how to do taxidermy from watching YouTube videos and decided to start doing my own because I was paying too much taxidermy. And so I just started mounting my own deer and eventually just quit my job, started doing it full time. But I grew up hunting down in South Alabama, down in Selma, Alabama, hunting swampland, flatland, stuff like that. And that's kind of what got me started on the historical data thing. Growing up, the club that we were in was considered a trophy managed club. This was back in the 80s, before there was a lot of trophy management going on. We had a biologist that watched over our property. We had doe tags. We were 8 point or better. There wasn't any size requirement really. It's just 8 points. And my family had started the club. So most of the members were either family or family friends. And we just didn't shoot deer unless we were going to mount them. That was kind of the general rule, even in the 80s. So I grew up in a situation where I didn't know any different. You just grew up deer hunting, and you didn't shoot a buck unless you were going to mount him. And back then, as much as I hate to say it for myself, the standards were a lot higher than even where I set my own standards. And that was what I will mount, I mean, them guys back then, man, they wouldn't mount a deer unless it was 140, 150 inches.
Oh, wow.
In a lot of
South
cases,
Alabama?
let's
Wow.
say it was an 8 point. I mean, there was, some really nice 125, 138 points that people would mount stuff. But, I mean, we were killing, like, the biggest deer I think come out of that club was 176, 174. Matter of fact, my best friend killed him as a guest. I brought him as a guest for $30 and put him in my tree lounge tree stand. And he shot that buck one morning trying to kill a doe. So, but it was a monster. It was 14 point, 22 inches wide. I mean, just
Wow.
a giant. But there was a bunch of 160s that come out of there several a year. And this was, like I said, back in the 80s and 90s. So growing up, we didn't have cameras, and we didn't have, cell phones. We didn't have anything. You could buy a GPS, but nobody really used them because you were in a hunting club. You had a map and you had roads and a four-wheeler. So we just went around, and the places that we scouted, if you killed deer there, that was like your lucky spot. Everybody had their favorite tree or their favorite box stand or whatever. And that's where you went every year and sat for months. I mean, you sit there for 3 months, and eventually you'd kill a buck, and it'd be like, yeah, but it paid off. That stand always pays off. And if you had like stand 20, for instance, if somebody liked hunting that stand, but a buck had not been killed off of it, say there's a big buck killed there every single year, somebody would always say, man, stand 20 is due. You've already heard that before, man. This place over here is due. Like every year is a big buck killed out there. And everybody would kind of take turns going over there, or kind of try to beat each other there, and eventually there'd be a good buck killed. Well, what I started to notice as I got older, but after it kind of went from being luck to being me trying to apply skill and stuff that I was trying to remember, and I was writing down stuff I was just obsessed with. Even as a kid, like I loved deer. I loved drawing them. I loved sculpting them out of clay. Like when I was a kid, I just loved whitetail deer, so it was interesting to me to scout. I liked even scouting when we go forward ride in the summer. That's what I did. I went and looked for old rub lines and old scrapes and just imagine what it was like, why the deer were in there,
Yeah.
Well, what I started noticing as I got a little older and started applying some of what the information was we had, I started noticing that these bucks that were getting killed were very close to the same times every single year in these specific spots. And it couldn't have been a coincidence. We had 5 or 6 years worth of data in our sign out book. We didn't throw them away, so you could go in the clubhouse and you had 5 or 6 years of every single buck that had ever been killed, the time of day, the date that it was killed, and the stand number.
Nice.
So I would just go in there and get to look, and I'm like, well, stand 20 is always good. But every buck that's ever been killed there has been killed on January the 22nd through the 25th. So you got guys sitting there for 3 months every year, every day. And every single buck that's ever killed there is within a 3-4 day period. And I get to looking at all the other places, and it was the same thing over and over and over and over again. And by the time I was 18, I was working full time. I didn't go to college. I started working when I was young. And I worked a lot, working retail. I was working holidays, Saturdays. Every Saturday I worked my whole life till I quit. And usually I would be able to hunt 2 days a week, sometimes one. But Christmas week, Thanksgiving, all those holidays in the grocery store, man, you had to work.
Yeah.
So I might be there 10, 15 days in a row. So what that turned into was I would just start a calendar. I would just figure out what days I'm going to be off. At the time, I wasn't writing down stuff in a calendar. But I would have days where I knew I'm going to be off next Thursday of next week. So what bucks get killed on that date where? And I would just look, just because it was the only thing I had. It was the only piece of relevant information during the rut that I had to go by, because everybody just talks about the rut like it's just random blind luck. You got to get on hopefully a hot doe, and maybe you'll see a buck chasing, and It just don't happen that often. Not really. I mean, if you really think about it, especially like I hate to break apart the Northwest and Southeast, but down here in Alabama, it's so thick. I mean, if you see a buck chasing a doe, man, it's like a diamond in the rough. You know, you can know that they're rutting. You can see bucks walking trails and you can see bucks looking for does, but to actually see one chasing doesn't happen that often. But
sounds like the marshes here.
do what?
You can have one chasing 5 yards from you and you'll never see it.
That's it. I mean, you'll hear them. A lot of times you'll hear, especially cutovers and pine things and stuff, you'll hear grunting and you'll hear running. And you know it was a buck chasing a doe, but you don't know if it was a spike or the world record. You know, you just can't see them. But what we started doing, or what I started doing, was on those days when I would get off work, I would just go and sit where I was supposed to sit. And inevitably, I may not kill a buck every time I went in the woods, but I would see bucks. I was seeing bucks chasing does. I was seeing bucks grunting. I was seeing bucks run across food plots with their nose to the ground. Like there were hot does in that area. And it started happening every day that I went to the club. And, you know, something else you got to keep in mind too, down here, you know, whereas if you go like when I go and hunt like the Midwest, you got that late October, you know, you start seeing some sign mid-October stuff. And then all of a sudden, 1st November, right through the first couple of weeks, there's just bucks running does everywhere. And then it just kind of ends and you kind of have like that post rut. Whereas down here, we don't. You know, in Alabama, they start scraping in parts of Alabama mid to late October because of all the bucks that's been brought in from Michigan and from some other states. But then we've got our bucks are still rutting in March. You know, so when you're talking about rut hunting, if you come to Alabama to hunt and you're used to hunting the Midwest, for instance, you are at a severe disadvantage if you do not know those dates, because so much of what we do is based on rut hunting. We don't have a preseason. I mean, you got 2 or 3 weeks of bow season and the bucks break up, start doing their rut type pattern, traveling to go to where they're going to breed or look for their first doe. Well, then they don't, I mean, they just go around and breed does. You know, they don't get back on a food source. You never see them eating again. Unless you're just in a specific little farm where they're done there, you know, but like if you're trying to follow the rut or if you're hunting the state or hunting public land, well, I mean, you're at the mercy of those does going into heat, you know, so knowing that information is really valuable down here because it puts you in a tree on top of a hot doe every single time you get in the woods. And I didn't really go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I was just, that could be very frustrating, especially like you said, if someone was traveling down south to hunt, because I've heard so many people down south just talk about their rut, just like you described it, right? It's very spread out. There are certain areas that get hot, certain areas, like if you're not in the action, you are not in the action.
Right.
You're way off. And I could see how that could be very frustrating, because heck, I even get frustrated in the Midwest sometimes because same thing, like if you're not in the area where there's a hot doe or you know, the bucks are wanting to be at that time, like you man, last season I had that happen a couple times and I was just like, why in the world am I sitting here? Like, I'm not seeing what I want to see. Like the action's not here. I need to move, go somewhere else. So yeah, it could be, it sounds extremely frustrating.
Yeah, well, it can be, but there again, like I said, it's predictable. It's just knowing what to do when, and then trusting that process and not leaving. Because if you're just rut hunting, you're not going to see deer, not often. You know, you're going to see, and I say that, you're going to see the deer that you want to see more often, but you're not going to sit there and watch does feed. You're not going to sit there and watch food sources. You know, I hunt mainly trails, and I'm either not seeing a deer or I'm killing a deer. You know, it's one of the two. But in the meantime, it's like if I only see 20 deer a year and 5 of them are shooters, well, I consider that a very good percentage compared to the average hunter. And especially somebody trying to get started. Like if somebody has never killed a buck in their life, I mean, I do taxidermy work for guys that kill their first buck, and it might be a little 6-point or 8-point. They want to get it mounted. They've been hunting for 8 or 9 years and have never shot a buck, you know? And to me, it's aggravating because I grew up learning from some really good deer hunters on a fantastic piece of private land where we had access to everything. We had history with it, and I was able to learn over a period of 20 years. how this stuff was done in kind of a controlled environment. Whereas a lot of folks don't even, I mean, nowadays they don't learn how to hunt until they're in their 30s.
Yeah.
There's a big separation now. How old are y'all?
I'm 26.
Yeah. Sklenar's young. I'm young, but not as young. I turned 33.
Okay.
This December.
Well, I just turned 45, and like what I've noticed over the last several years, when I was young, it seemed like everybody deer hunted. You deer hunted with your dad and you deer hunted with your granddad.
Yep.
And that's how it worked. Whether it was public land, private land, anything, that's just how it worked. You even had a camp at public land. Everybody went and you stayed, and the old men were there and they cooked breakfast, and that kind of stuff. Well, as I got probably into my late 20s, early 30s, it seemed like nobody hunted. All that went away. A lot of people were fishing in the wintertime. Hunting wasn't popular anymore. People didn't want to do it. People were talking bad about it. It just got to where like they wouldn't even show it in the media. Like it got to a real negative bunch of feedback all of a sudden. And it was kind of probably with the growth of social media. That's probably kind of where that came from, where all of a sudden people that didn't hunt were seeing all these animals and, deer getting shot and all this crazy stuff. And it just exploded on social media and turned it into a problem almost. And it was almost like not the cool thing to do. So that generation, a lot of them did not grow up hunting. Whereas now a lot of people are hunting, especially y'all's age. And I mean, man, teenagers and 20-year-olds now, you can't hardly get in the woods during turkey season, duck season. It don't matter what season it is. There's people everywhere, which is a good thing. I mean, I'm glad that everybody's hunting, but what it has created is you don't have a bunch of young guys learning from elderly folks anymore. You've lost that group of old men that can no longer be in the woods. I mean, those guys that I remember, I mean, now they're in their 70s, 80s. They're not out there showing all the young guys how to scout, what to look for. And everybody now is learning from this, from podcasts, from social media, from whatever their buddy did and what he learned or heard. And so it's beneficial whenever somebody has got some information, whether it be cameras or whether it be historical data. If you just have hunted for 8 or 9 years and that in this area there's always a big buck killed on this property you hunt with, whether you've even killed him or not. I mean, you can hunt with 20 guys on the same property for 20 years and you're going to know the best place on the property. Well, if you go post-season, here it's February, if you'll go out there and find all those scrapes and all those rubs, if you'll look somewhere in that general area where those bucks are always killed, you're going to find where they all live. You're going to find it's going to be either a thicket, the side of a bluff wall, something, a swamp, wherever you're at. It's going to be the nastiest, worst possible place you can imagine, close to where those bucks always get killed. And when you go in there and put up a camera the following season, you will get pictures or video. I always set my camera on video, but you will get videos of those deer within a certain date range. And then when the season is over, you go collect all those cameras. Well, then you've got your dates. Mm-hmm. So even though you're not necessarily chasing a specific buck all the time, if you've got video of a trophy buck or what you consider a trophy buck, whatever size you'd like to kill, there will more than likely be bucks that size there every year from now to the end of time, unless something really drastic changes. And I haven't seen too many drastic changes that will even change that. And it's because, go ahead.
Sorry, you finish your thought. I'll
like I said, stop me if you like. I will talk nonstop. Like I won't even let y'all talk. That's just the way I am. I get excited about this stuff. So if y'all have any questions, stop me. And
I was just going to ask about the cameras and that. Are you setting those on scrapes? Are you setting those on like signpost rubs, terrain?
A little bit of both. Okay. I prefer trails. Reason being is because a lot of the places I'm putting cameras, number one, there are some of them are a long way from the road, but also I want my batteries to last all deer season, because I'm not gonna go and hang a camera and then go in there and check it every week to see if I need to be hunting there. Mm-hmm. The way that I hunt during the rut and what I have learned, by the time you get a picture of that buck, you need to be pulling the trigger. 9 times out of 10, the biggest deer you got on camera, you're going to get once, maybe twice. And it's not because you're missing him. It's not because he's walking behind the camera and he's in there every day. It is because he has come by there and he is either going to breed a doe, he just bred a doe, or he's going to his next doe, something like, but he's there for a reason, and he's there almost every year, and it's going to be within a few day period. And that's when you got to shoot him. You can talk to a lot of different, Michael Perry, for instance, his muzzleloader record, the Alabama record. He had, I think, 3 pictures of that deer, 1 picture per year, 3 years in a row. That was within about a 3-day period.
Wow.
You know, we didn't even really put that together until we got to talking one day, and it was like, so what was the dates exactly? You know what I mean? You get to look and it's like, there it is. You know, and you could have not hunted the rest of the 3 months of the year and been perfectly fine. The deer wasn't there. It's not like you were missing him, especially during the rut. Like, you know, pre-season or pre-rut, late, you know, post-rut, when they're on food and they're in bedding and stuff like that, whole different set of rules. But everybody struggles the most finding bucks during the rut because you're not really finding them. You know what I mean? You can't find them. They're ahead of you the whole time. One thing that we've noticed the last several years, when you put up a camera, like say you'd asked about where I put up my cameras. If I've got, like I don't ever do it on food source because you're going to burn your batteries. Community scrapes are kind of the same way. There's gonna be a lot of deer on a community scrape. I don't mind doing that as long as it's in a place that, like if you've got a bunch of crazy terrain, like a bluff or like a bunch of points come together on top of a ridge line that's away from people where maybe nobody would know it was there. Like I try my best not to let anybody find a camera. I put them in weird places, not just height up trees, but like in between spots. Like I rarely will put one in a thermal hub, in a saddle, in all that stuff. I will not have a camera in any of them. There'll be 10 cameras in all of them on public land.
Yeah. So you're targeting more like travel corridors.
Correct. Because what those deer do is you go, like when I was in the club, for instance, the last hunting club I was in before I quit hunting clubs, we had 3,500 acres, had 70 members. Okay. Which sounds crazy to me now, but at the time it's just hunting club life, and that keeps the dues low, you know. Well, you'd go out there and every stand would have somebody's name on it, you know, so you just kind of had to get somewhere. And if you wanted to hunt somewhere, you just stayed out of everybody's way. And what I started doing was just checking the road for tracks. You know, we'd just ride the roads and find where bucks had been crossing the dirt roads, and they weren't county roads. You could hunt these. It was like 4-wheeler roads and stuff. And I would just go and set up a stool on the side of the road in a bush, you know, and I would sit there, and when that buck crossed the road, I would shoot him and go get him. But by doing that, I started learning that when I would go in there, I'd watch trucks go by and go by and go by. And when all the trucks stopped, bucks would start crossing the road. And all these bucks I was killing were, I mean, a lot of them within 100 yards of where the guys were parked that were hunting the green fields or hunting the box stands and stuff. And all the bucks were just coming out of the woods closer to the trucks. So when I started hunting public, you know, I started applying the same techniques, but also the same thing as hunting deep. Like if everybody goes deep from where they're parked, you kind of end up on top of each other. Yeah. So in specific situations, you can have guys come down a ridge or down a drainage, or if you find thermal hub, a saddle, a thermal hub, and a saddle, you know, there's a very good chance you can assume there's somebody going to be in all of them. And that spot in the middle is where all the bucks are going to go to. And that may be 3 miles from the truck, but it may also be 50 yards from the truck. So my favorite thing to do is just find rub lines. That's what I focus on is rub lines. I don't care how old they are. All I need is 2 or 3 of them. So if you find multiple, like, because a buck will rub a tree. I mean, he's chasing a doe out in some random area and just gets mad and rubs a tree. That doesn't help you a whole lot if you just got one tree that's rubbed, unless it's a big signpost rub. And if it's rubbed every year, that's a little bit different. Found one of those a couple years ago. Remind me, we'll get back to that. That's a really cool story there. But like if you find little bitty, they can be the size of your pinky finger. If you find 3 or 4 of them in a row on the side of a cliff, like just say it's on the side of a hill, well, you can look at your topography map or look at your, you know, whatever map you got, even if it's satellite imagery, like say out west, you got a cedar thicket and like a cornfield, and you've got this area of patchy cedars and sage grass or CRP or whatever in between those. Well, if you find a few little rubs, you can look at your map and say, oh, he's probably feeding here and he's probably bedding here. Well, it's really hard to kill them where they're bedding, and it's really hard to kill them where they're feeding, unless you know they're going to be out there before dark and you can catch them right on the edge of that cornfield, for instance. It happens, but that's also where everybody else is going to be. So what I prefer to do is where those rubs are at, I'll just hang a camera right there. I don't need any sign other than a 3-year-old rub line, because that's the buck trail. And every buck's going to use that trail, whether he makes sign on it or not. Because a lot of times during those phases of the rut, they may not just be laying down a lot of sign, especially if there's very little food and water. They won't put down any sign, but they're still going to use the same exact trail, and they're going to do it on the same exact dates. So when you put that camera up, a lot of times I will make a mock scrape just to get them to stop, mess around a minute, kind of get a good look at them.
Yeah.
But I'll make it very small, a little bit of buck urine in it, and just turn my camera on video mode. Like I said, I'll put them up in September or early October. New batteries, blank SD card, and I'll turn them on, and I will not go back in there till February. I'll just let them run, because once you've done that, you've already introduced your scent. You've already introduced a camera. Well, every time you go back, obviously, you're just educating deer, but you're also educating hunters. Your truck's going to be parked there, everything else. So I just leave it alone, let it run a year, and then I'll go pull all of my cameras, and I'll sit down at my computer. Each camera, you're going to have to number your SD card, number the camera, and coincide that with the number on your app, your hunting app. Because even if you've got 3 cameras, I mean, you get back and accidentally drop 2 SD cards. I mean, unless you recognize the spot on the camera pictures, you could have absolutely no idea where those deer are at, and have all kind of good deer on certain dates and have no clue which camera it was.
Yeah.
So you got to be real careful as far as keeping that organized ahead of time. And then once you get that data, just break it down on your computer or whatever. I'll save all those pictures. And then once I've got all those pictures done, I'll write down all those dates in just a regular paper calendar so that I can refer to that on any specific day that I want to go hunting. Now, what's kind of weird about doing that, like if you put up a camera, most people are used to putting up cameras and checking them and seeing if they need to hunt there.
Mm-hmm.
But what this is going to be basically is a 2-year plan. Okay.
That was going to be one of my next questions, as far as like, how long are you collecting this data before you're able to like really capitalize on it?
Right. If you've got previous data, for instance, like if you know where bucks were killed on a specific piece of property, or if you yourself have ever killed a buck out of a certain tree, then all you got to do is go back. If you've got dates, if you can figure out what date that was, you can go back in there and kill another one this year. You know what I mean? Like that's already exists. You don't need that information because you already have it. But doing this with the cameras, you're going to have to scout, whether it be postseason or preseason. Preseason, you're better off finding old rub lines, because there's not going to be just a whole lot of good sign in the woods, and it's harder to find because of just the greenery, just the undergrowth and stuff.
Yeah.
But best case scenario, if you can postseason scout, get those places, mark them all on your app, and I would suggest using a specific color pen for places that you found sign, places that need a camera. Okay. When you go back in September, October, you've got your cameras loaded up, fresh batteries, blank SD cards, everything labeled, numbered. You'll go back to those places, change that pin. Like, let's just call it stand number 1. You're going to have SD card 1, camera number 1 is going to go on spot number 1. Spot number 1 is going to go from blue to red because now there's a camera in a tree. Okay. If you don't do this on this hunting apps nowadays, I mean, you'll have 400,000 pins on there. Y'all probably do yourselves. And you'll get on there and be like, man, where was that spot at? But I will not use red and blue on mine. Red means there's a camera. Blue means there's a killing tree. And nothing else on my app is going to be those 2 colors, except for those 2 things. And when you hang that camera, you're going to change that to whatever color you want. Give it a description, give it that number, and then just leave it. And then you'll have that deer season. So you'll get all your pictures or videos. Well, then when the season ends, go collect that camera. You're going to sit down and get all that data, and it's going to give you your dates. And what will blow your mind, if you put out 5 cameras, you're going to have 5 specific weeks that it's going to make you want to vomit because you wasted so much time not being there. You know what I mean? Like there are places I put cameras. The first year I ever hunted public land, we went in there, postseason scouted, same method I'd always done on hunting club land, and didn't know what to expect, because I'd never hunted public land day in my life till about 4 years ago. So we just went in there. It's like, well, we'll just do what we always do. So my buddy Jeremy killed that giant buck when I was a kid. He went with me. We did our scouting, found amazing sign everywhere. Well, come deer season, went back in there, hung our cameras, and then we just started hunting. We didn't know when the rut was. We didn't know really nothing at the time. We were just sitting where the giant sign was at, where we knew there was a big buck the year before. Well, I ended up shooting a buck that I lost, really, really nice 8-point. And aside from that, we didn't see any shooter bucks. We saw a lot of little deer, a lot of small spikes, 4-point stuff, even chasing does. We did see some deer chasing, but never did see any good deer. Not that made sense with what sign we found. Well, when the season ended, it's like I confirmed my worst fear. Went in there and started checking all these cameras, and every camera had like 130s to 150s on them. It was just like, oh man. And we had missed them by like 2 weeks or like 3 weeks. And if you take, this is something that kind of blew my mind. If you take even a smaller piece of property, say 300 acres, you can put up 3 cameras and you will get 3 specific date ranges. And all it is that one doe on that 3-day estrus cycle. So if you change that thought in your mind from rut to a 3-day estrus cycle, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a specific doe's 3-day estrus cycle. And if you've got a group of 5 does, there might be one on December the 1st through the 3rd over here on this ridge. And there may be another one on the 6th through the 8th over on this other ridge. And they might not be 100 yards apart. But does will split up. I don't know if y'all ever noticed that. It's kind of like hen turkeys. When it's time for them to breed, they don't stay in a big wad and feed. A buck comes and breeds one of them. They kind of bust up. And those does, they don't like to be around other does that are in heat. They'll almost spook. If a doe comes running in heat, the other ones will blow at her. Yep. They don't have nothing to do with it. And just from what little bit of kind of research I've done on that, the does supposedly will go to an area that they like to breed. When they know they're going into heat, they will end up, and it may not be 100 yards away from where they usually feed, but they have got a spot that they like to go where they feel safe, where they're going to meet with their buck.
We actually just did a podcast breaking that down.
Okay.
They're like, I don't know what the factor is, but it's extremely common and extremely likely that the doe is far from her. And again, don't know the specific yardage typically, but their does are very likely to go on an excursion right before they get bred, essentially, is what this research has found. And it was extremely conclusive.
Yeah, that's what we noticed here is, especially on private land, like on my piece of property here, I've only got 13 acres, but I've put up cameras the last 3 years just to see what would happen here. Because Jacob and Andrew had been asking me about just how specific that was back during that first podcast. I said, well, I was hanging a camera back here on 13 acres on one tree right behind my barn, and I'll just put out some corn, and I'll leave it out there year round, and we'll just see what happens.
Yeah.
Well, in 3 years, we had, the first year there was 4 does. They were there nearly year round, and about mid-November, we had, I think, 3 bucks showed up, young deer. One of them was a little perfect rack 8-point. Well, the next year we had about 7 or 8 does by that time hanging around. Some of them were little yearlings. They'd had babies, and it was like, oh, good, there's corn here and we're safe. So they had found the food and started living here. And well, come mid-November, all of a sudden you had 5 or 6 bucks showed up, and it was all within about a 6 or 7 day period. And that little 8-point, he had kind of a black face and just a perfect, his rack was one of those racks. He was a size bigger. He showed back up, and he was there the same exact day 1 year later. And then he came in again the following morning, same time, and then he was gone. Well, 2 years ago, last year I had a camera up back there, the same buck. He showed up again. He was a 3-year-old, just a pretty 110-inch, 115-inch 8-point. Showed up 1 day earlier than he did the previous 2 years, and was only there for 1 day. And came up, what even with a doe, came walking up, ate some corn, and left. All 3 years coming from the same direction, all 3 years, come through there one time, except for the second year, come through there 2 mornings in a row. And
So,
same thing, 6, go ahead.
Go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say 6 bucks last year before last, came to that spot. So what I was telling Jacob and them is like, I could give you permission just based on that information, just on my property. I could give you permission, if it were legal, for you to hunt and kill every deer you saw 365 days a year, except for 7. Those 7 days, I'm going to go back there and get in that box. And I will kill every single buck on my property, and you will never see one. That's how specific that is. And that, from a deer hunting standpoint, when you've got a 4-month deer season like we do here, I mean, we got 3 months of gun season. If you are just going and getting on trees that's got scrapes and rubs, the deer's 20 miles from you. You know what I mean? You've done,
Yeah.
you're not even close to what you need to be doing. And those mature deer, if you start doing this and start paying attention to those dates, a lot of those mature deer will show up first. I guess the only thing I can figure is it's because they know where they're going when that hormone hits. They just leave, they go ahead and travel, they get to where the doe's going to be, and they wait on her. Is the only thing I can figure. Because what happens, this is what we noticed when we started hunting public land, because before we didn't really look at any sign or anything. So we was hunting private property. We already knew where we were going to sit. We weren't really scouting. So when we started hunting public, we would go into a place and find 30 scrapes and all these rubs. Well, then you go in the following year with your dates and sit, and you get in at 3 o'clock in the morning and sit, and it starts getting daylight, and there's no sign anywhere. Well, I mean, a buck come in there and you kill him. You climb down, get to look, and it's like, man, there's no sign anywhere. As much sign was in here last year, there's none. Well, you kill that deer, and then you may go hunt 2 or 3 other places. Well, you come back to that spot 3 or 4 days later, and there'd be 50 scrapes. I mean, they'd be just the woods tore to pieces. Well, when you go to look back at those cameras, you realize that it's like the doe showed up and the buck showed up, and she was in heat, and they put all this scent in the woods, and then all these immature deer showed up, and they tore the woods to pieces. And you go in there thinking, man, there's deer running everywhere in here, and all it was a 6-point and a spike that decided to make 20 scrapes in one night. Because we saw that happen several times. You go in one day and there'd be nothing. Go in the next day and there'd be 20 or 30 scrapes. And it's not like the woods are full of bucks. It's just all those bucks showed up because they smelled that, or they come through there and realized what was happening. But that mature buck, he's done gone. You know, so you should have already shot him. You know, he was there first. So that happens a lot.
Yeah, I see that consistency a lot of the time, like particularly surrounding the rut, you know, because of does, like with your eyes. And there's 2 things I want to touch on. One, I highly second that color coding system. I have 4 colors that I do for my cameras.
Right.
So I have a differentiated camera icon, and then I have a white icon if it's a cell cam 2 set, and then a pink icon if it is a SD cam 2 set, and then a black icon if there's an active camera there, and a brown icon with notes on the dates that I set the camera and picked up the camera if I've already set the camera there. So it will go from brown. If I've already set a camera in that location, I'm doing it again, it'll go from brown to black. And then if I want to set a camera in there, it'll go from either white or blue or white or pink.
Very important, because you will end up, especially if you start hunting multiple places and multiple states, whatever you're doing. I mean, you'll have so much information on there that you can't figure out even what to do. And that's why I like a paper calendar. There's so much digital stuff. I keep so much stuff on my phone anyway, that if I just have a random day, which, you know, working for myself now, I still have to work a lot, but I can also choose if a cold front hits, or if the weather's supposed to be good that morning or whatever. I might just choose that day I can go hunting. Like, I don't have to work this afternoon, or I don't have to work tomorrow morning. And I'll just open up my calendar, look at that date, and I will have written down on there, it will say stand 1. You know what I mean? I will have it numbered and know exactly what tree to go get in, regardless. I don't think of anything. Nothing matters. I just go get in that tree and sit and just see what happens.
Yeah.
And you'll put yourself in the middle of a hot doe every time you sit in the woods when you're hunting rut like that.
Right. I drop a gold waypoint for fresh sign, and I have a folder for fresh and then different times of the year. And so I can, if it's like right now, like I would filter my app by gold, and I would filter it by this date or early season for me.
Right.
And I could find like what stands are recommended for certain dates, and it might be even smaller ranges than, you know, a week. But in your example, I know you had corn out there. So I was curious, and I know like we're particularly talking about rut, so this is not quite as applicable because most of the motivation during rut is going to be does. Yeah. But I mean, kind of the general area they're in is not always food based. It's typically not. But would you see a significant difference in a property if, you know, if like for instance up here, soybeans versus corn provides a lot more cover, completely different end of the season in terms of when it's a food source typically. So it will drastically change the historical data. Like my historical data from a corn year to the next year, 3 years later that they plant corn will be really accurate. But 1 year to the next, soybeans to corn, it won't be even close to the same. Do you find that at all? outside of the rut that the food is a huge influence.
It would be definitely, especially where that food is at. Like you said, if they change what kind of food, or if they plant different fields, I mean, it's obviously going to change where those does are feeding. That rut cycle is still going to stay the same. So in that situation, what you're going to want to try to do, figure out where the food went, and then just go to your same dates you hunted the previous food source, because it's the same deer. You know what I mean? Assuming they didn't have to travel 10 miles to go try to find food. But
do you
I
find
would
that,
say they're, go ahead.
so I was just in, let's say, hill country where there's not ag, and you used to have different like rotating acorn crops than that.
Yeah.
Do you find that to be like the
No,
same
in
case?
hill country, the last 2 years, we've had 0 acorns. I'm talking about none. I mean, no food anywhere. And the guys that normally sign hunt, that do a lot of scouting during season, that walk and walk and walk, they'll look for fresh sign. A lot of them are very successful. They'll find sign, kill off sign. Well, last year there wasn't any. There was no sign. The deer did not make scrapes hardly at all. I mean, for every 10 you saw 2 years ago, there was maybe one. And I mean, just very, very few, probably the fewest scrapes I've ever seen hunting in the last 15 years.
Wow.
But all of the bucks were in the same exact places, on the same trails, on the same dates. I ended up killing 3 good bucks last year on the same exact dates I planned to kill them. And it was just because they had been there for the last 20 years, you know, basically. But I think a lot of it has to do with, if you're in big woods, if there's no food, there's no food.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's not like they're going to leave and go 30, 40 miles to go find a food source. They're just going to start eating tree bark if they have to. You know, it just changes what kind of food they're eating. And it also puts stress on them. So you're not going to find the sign, which to me is the shining moment of these rut dates and a rut calendar, is when you've got these tough years where people say there was a weak rut. Well, a lot of times that's just nighttime breeding. You know, when you've got a moon phase that hits right or something, the deer, a lot of them's breeding at night, or they're not seeing them on the same food sources. They're not, maybe those bucks are not frequenting that same exact oak tree, but they're still in that same area because there's a doe in there that's hot. So if he goes, like, let's say he lives on this little 2-acre thicket. Well, if he has to travel 5 miles across big terrain to go to his first doe, well, he doesn't even realize that there's no acorns over there till he gets there. I'm killing him on that trail on his way. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
So like it for what I'm doing, a lot of my bucks I'm killing are what everybody considers to be pre-rut. They're leaving to go to their does. And I've killed several that are behind does chasing them. But usually when I kill them, everybody's like, man, that doesn't make any sense. Like they're not in rut yet. But in a hunting club, if y'all have ever been in a hunting club where you know everybody and everybody knows everybody and everybody knows the land, it's like the rut week is the week of Christmas, you know, or it's the week of so-and-so. Well, we had that property I was in had all those members. When I first got in that club, they had 3 years worth of data. So I took a map of the club and I pinned all 3 years, any buck that was killed that was a shooter, good, mature deer. I pinned him on that map and put dates on each pin. And when I got done, there were 3 specific circles of date ranges on that map. So I just went to the center of those circles postseason and started scouting. And inevitably, I mean, right in the center of each circle, there would be a swamp, or there would be a thicket, or there would be a cutover. You know, I mean, you could see on the map exactly where the deer were living. But I would just go in there and then find the trails coming out of that where they were accessing. And I would put up a camera and figure out those exact dates for that trail. And that following season, I ended up killing 3 bucks, 1 out of each spot. But what I learned about doing that, especially on a new piece of property, was the first time our club shut down in Selma in the mid 2000s. And when that happened, I'd never hunted anywhere else in my life. So, I mean, I've been down there for 20 years hunting the same piece of property, and that's all I knew. So I just went and applied what I had learned down there on a brand new piece of property, ended up killing 3 shooter bucks, and just had those date ranges. And everybody there, the first one that I killed, matter of fact, it was like the third week of November. And the rut there is not historically until the week after Christmas. That's when the rut really hits right there. And that's when everybody takes off work. That's when all the big bucks are usually killed, because when everybody's there. Well, when I got my camera footage back, I was sitting there thinking, well, I mean, you got 6 or 7 bucks coming down this trail, going down the side of this cliff right here mid-November during daylight hours. You know what I mean? And that just doesn't make sense. If they're not, bucks won't do that unless there's does. Unless it's early season, you're not going to see a whole bunch of bucks traveling down the trail anywhere during daylight. You know what I mean? They just won't just do it at random usually. But now when I got to looking at the map, you had 6 or 8 good bucks that had been killed the last 3 years, and they were killed in each green field right around that hillside. And they were all in November. But they were those deer that somebody would shoot and say, man, I got lucky. Finally, I got him before the rut even got started. Well, I get to look at those trails or those cameras, and it was like, man, like there's does here. There are does. There's got to be does here in heat or something. There's got to be a reason. So the first day when I got that footage, there was a big hillside. It's the side of a pine thicket. It's a cliff, and it had a bench going down the side of it. It was steep, and all the pines weren't but 6 or 8 inches in diameter. You couldn't really climb them. You couldn't really sit on the ground because it was so steep. It's just an uncomfortable spot. Great place for a buck, but terrible place to try to sit. Mm-hmm. So me and my buddy, he had an old ladder stand. We just took the ladder off of it. Just the seat with the ladder rungs, an old one. We just took the top section, went up the top of that mountain, and just leaned it up against one of those pine trees about 75 yards up the hill from that bench, and just chained it to the tree, just so I'd have a place to sit down. He was making fun of me, he's like, this is the dumbest thing, But I mean, it's theoretically, it's where you had to get. So anyway, the first day I didn't go back to the club at all until that third week of November, whenever it was. Well, he kept calling me. He was like, man, where you at? Like, he'd hunt every weekend. Like, well, bucks ain't going to be there. Like, I don't even know where the deer are at until these dates. And that's when I'm coming. He was like, man, that's okay, whatever. Well, anyway, I finally showed up. He had not seen a buck the whole time he'd been every weekend all season. Well, I got there that Friday. We ate supper, got up the next morning. He said, you really going to go sit in that stand? I said, yeah, I'm going to go over there. I went over there and killed a 240-pound 9-point at 7:15 in the morning. And he was chasing a doe grunting. There was a 7-point behind her. Well, 2 does come running up the hill. A spike come running up grunting, chasing them. Then a 7-point come behind them, and that big 9-point come running over the hill. And I killed him. And I mean, first time I ever sat there, I was like, those deer are rutting. I don't care what anybody says. Like that doe is in heat and those bucks are chasing her. Well, by the end of that season, we'd had those cameras up and we had a big buck. He was like an 11-point, had like split brow tines and a sticker. He was a weird looking deer. Like you knew it was him if you saw him on camera.
Yeah.
Well, that property was 3,500 acres. And this camera was on the west property line. I mean, within 300, 400 yards of the property line on 3,500 acres. Well, the stand on the far east property line, as far as you could go, we had a camera over there too, because that was another one of those rut areas, which made sense because it was as far apart as you could get on that club, but only 3,500 acres. I mean, not that big a deal, but you're talking about the difference between November the 20th and January the 17th, 18th. So 2 completely different dates on the same hunting club property. Well, that buck, I had him on camera during that week on the west side, and then the week on the east side, when all the bucks showed up, he was with them too. And that's when I realized we're not just sitting here trying to wait on the buck to chase a doe out of the thicket. Like, I'm trying to find that buck as he's breeding does. He's not just going and breeding a doe. You think about him going and getting locked down with a doe, and in your mind it's like, well, they're on lockdown now. It's going to be a month. He's going to be laid out there in the field with her. She's only in Estrus 3 days. So if you see a buck that's in lockdown or you see him with a doe, that is very temporary, which is why it's very rare to see them chasing or see them breeding or whatever, because they'll breed and then they're going to go over here to these dates, and they're going to go to these dates and then these dates and then these dates. And if you scout that property or you've got information on that property or you put up cameras for a year, you're going to find all these little specific date ranges. And I mean, if you've got 3 or 4 days, and then 2 weeks later, there's 3 or 4 days on a different spot, don't just assume that those deer were just running around in both places and you just happen to get pictures of them. Like, they were here, then they were here. So you can just leave this spot and go to this spot on those dates, and you're right in front of those deer. And that's the biggest thing. If you've got a buck that shows up November 7th, be in that stand November the 4th. You know what I mean? Like when he walks by, shoot him and then leave. You know, go to those next dates. And, you know, Jacob Andrew was asking me about, you know, all this stuff like how does people not find you because you've got these dates and everything. Well, if you're there, the bucks are there. If you're not, they're not. So it really doesn't matter. By the time I check my cameras, after that year, I just pull them. Like I never put a camera on that tree ever again, ever. So people can't find it. Deer don't get spooked off of it. There's no camera in there because you've already got the dates. You may not ever know again exactly what buck comes down that trail until you're looking at him. But to me, that's my personal favorite way to hunt. I like that element of surprise. I don't want to know every buck that's in the area that I'm hunting. I just don't. I did for a while, but now I don't.
Yeah.
Did you start off by having these cameras in there on consecutive years so that you could verify that the action? Okay, that's what I figured.
Yeah, yeah. At first, I was, you know, when game cameras first came out, especially, it was like you just put up a camera just to see if there was a deer there, or if it was a dog trail or a hog trail, or you know what I mean. You didn't even really know what you were doing,
right?
And then it kind of turned into buck sign, and you'd put cameras up, and then after that, it was. I'd put cameras up every year in those places, trying to see what was in there, trying to get an idea of the bucks I was hunting. Well, I mean, year after year after year after year, a buck had come through there once, and it's like, man, I don't know where he's going. I can't find him. I can't stay on him. He comes, but then he disappears, and then he shows back up 3 months later. You know, and you hear that all the time, where it's like early bow season. It's like, man, I got a good buck, and then he just disappears, and he don't ever show back up till late December or early January. It's like, well, I mean, if he's not hiding from you, like he's going and breeding however many does he's breeding, and everybody's getting pictures of him once. You know, he's just making a one direction loop. They rarely go back and forth. Rarely.
Yeah.
They just go, you know, and they end up back at square one. And that's their summer, you know, their place where they live during the summer and early bow season.
Yeah, I was talking to Pierce Nellis on the Wisconsin Sportsman's podcast about this actually. And a lot of like the bigger deer that have chased do loops. They don't do back and forth like we might like them to. And it makes sense when you think about it. Like deer, their nose has got such an ability that we can't even fathom. Like we have no concept for understanding how great their nose is. It's like if you, everywhere that you looked, could see what happened 30 days in the past and all the activity that happened 30 days in the past. You know, like that's how their nose works. So like it makes sense that they would take in information as they go and react to it instead of going back and forth. And then you think about how you make yourself vulnerable. Well, you get habitual, right? Like you go to the same areas. Now your scent is looming in there for many, many, many consecutive days. The probability that something's going to pick up on your scent is much higher.
Absolutely. And you got wind direction and thermal direction too. You start dealing with mountains. If that buck goes one direction, there is a very, very good chance that he cannot come back that direction without putting himself in harm's way.
100%.
You know what I mean? He's at an advantage the way he's traveling, and he knows that because he's 4 or 5 years old. You know, he's learned that's where he has to survive and when he has to survive. I've even noticed, like on the side, which I'm sure y'all have gone into this before, where on the side of a lot of mountains, you've got thermals rising, you've got wind blowing, and there's certain places that I call a thermal switch. I don't know if that's a technical term for it, but it's where the thermals meet the wind, and those rub lines are always there. You know, that's always where they're at, and it's because bucks can smell what we can't. You know what I mean? We can't see it, we can't smell it, but you can see it on those rub lines. Where that is, he's got that advantage. Well, if he's traveling north every year on a specific time of the year, there's a very good chance he did it on a specific wind, possibly, and a very good chance he can never come back that way unless he has to wait a week for a different wind. And he's not going to do that. It's rut. You know, he's not thinking straight, but he's trying to be careful at the same time. So once they get that travel route, I think they just kind of, like you said, they work their way as they can go. And once they've done it once, if you ever notice, if you get a picture of a big buck, a lot of times he's got a picture of a yearling with him. A lot of big mature deer will have a 1-year-old buck with them. It'd be like a 12-point and a spike. They rarely will tolerate a buck that's older than that, but I think a lot of that, it may just be their daddy or whoever they grew up with, and they just follow them. You know, they go to where they rut, they go to where they eat, they go to where they water, and that second year, they just go. That's where they go. Well, by the time they bust up and get territorial, that buck, I believe, still will go to those same does because that's what he learned.
Yeah.
So I think those loops are a product of that. You've got bucks crossing each other. Like I've heard a comedian talking about log trucks, how people take logs over here and people take logs over here and they just stay in the same place and cut their own trees and they won't have to drive nowhere. That's kind of how bucks are. Like they'll leave 7 does to go to breed a doe that they know is going to be an estrus in 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
We also
at the
found in
same
that
time,
study
another
that
buck
they're-
shows up. Do what?
Yeah. We found in that study that they're also selecting does that are more fertile and basically
Really?
their genetics are opposed to them in a way that allows them to combine together and become like the most resistant to disease and stuff like that. Humans naturally do that too as well. You guys can look
Yeah.
up like white t-shirt
Interesting.
studies if you want to look that up.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like bucks will do that for does and does will do that for bucks as well. Which it plays into your strategy a ton, which is really great. I want to give people a frame of reference for how successful or how difficult the strategy might be. Because like right now, to a listener that might not be very experienced, they might be hearing that, all I got to do is find the one day and make the one sit at the right time. And in reality, it might not be just quite that perfect.
Right.
So like,
I would say,
what would you say like per sit is kind of like a realistic percentage that you think that you succeed on? Like one of every 10 or 3 or
well, a lot of that's going to depend on deer numbers and it's going to depend on how picky you are. Well, for instance, like I'll just give you some numbers. Like I've been hunting public land now for 4 years. If you count the first year when I had no data, we hunted the first year with cameras in the woods. The last 3 years, I've killed 6 or 7 bucks over 115 inches and shot 2 that I lost. And I only hunted probably, let's see, probably 15 to 20 days, something like that per season with a rifle. A lot of the others were bow days, but now I also saw probably 20, 30, 40 bucks a year that I didn't shoot. So for somebody getting started, I would say that there is about a 80% success rate if you have got a 7-day period that you can sit in the woods. I would give it a week. I would say 7 days, because usually those pictures you get, they're going to start about 10 days out. It's going to be around 10 days where there's going to be a first buck show up, and it may be at night, and he may be whatever 4-point. But then the last buck may come through about 10 days later. So it just depends on when they show up, when they get there. But if somebody has got the patience and the trust in this system to put up cameras for a year, wait a season to try to kill those deer, then there is no doubt in my mind they're going to get a shot at a buck if they've got 7 days, 5 to 7 days to hunt. But you've got to trust that. You can't assume that you're messing your spot up, and you also can't go in there and mess your spot up either.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go in there and try to hunt it a week early.
days on that.
Consecutive every single day, getting the same exact tree. There's no reason to be anywhere else because the bucks are not. You have to be there, and that's the important part about it. You can't decide that you're going to sleep in that morning and go in late. You can't decide that you just wait till next week because the weather's supposed to be better. You know what I mean? The bucks are going to be gone. They don't care what the weather is. When they're breeding, they're on a time frame, on a schedule, and that rut cycle's on a schedule. It ain't waiting for a cold front. And you're at the mercy of the weather sometimes having to hunt that way, because we've hunted some bad stuff, but we have killed deer in some bad stuff when everybody else slept in, because we've got 100% confidence that if we're not there those days, we're never going to get a chance at him all year anyway.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions as far as like the weather effects on these date ranges. And I ask because last year, I'll get into this in a minute after you answer this question, but there's the piece of private I hunt in Ohio. I've used this strategy on, and it took a couple years to develop the strategy. And when you had this conversation with Jacob and Andrew over a year ago, right? That's why I wanted to talk to you so much about this, because it lined up with exactly with what I was seeing, almost to a T. But last year there was a buck I was after. There was a cold front that hit, and I was like, I just feel like I have to be in the woods, and it was about a day earlier than what I typically would.
Mhm.
But sure enough, I saw that buck, and he was following some does. So
Mhm.
I just how much confidence do you put in the dates versus like, okay, you have a good cold front, maybe you should change the dates a little
Well,
bit.
I mean, it's never a bad idea to hunt a good cold front ever. I mean,
Yep.
when you've got perfect situation, especially if you've got, let's say a horrible front comes through and you've got major storms, major everything for 2 days straight. I mean, I'm probably not going to go sit in the woods in a major thunderstorm. You just don't see many deer, but you want to be in that tree while it's still raining and about to stop, because by the time it quits raining, the bucks are already in front of your tree. It's one of the best times that you could ever be in the woods, in my opinion, is after a giant front, big storm. They're going to be moving, and it may be a few days before those dates or a few days even after those dates because of the weather. But this is the way that I do things. Like if I've got, let's say the month of November, let's say I've got 10 different specific trees, or let's just say 6 different specific trees that I want to try to sit in on specific date ranges. Well, what I'm going to do is if I've got the first buck shows up, say on November the 1st, and then the last one shows up in that area on the 8th. Well, if I've got another spot where they start showing up on the 6th, well, I might hunt from the 1st through the 5th, and then I may move over here on the 6th. But what I'll do in my calendar, every day of the whole month, I will have a stand written on it. So unless I'm just wanting to work that day or whatever, I'm going to write down, in case I can hunt, where I need to be for that specific date. So even if I don't have data for that date, or if it's 6, 7 days early or 6, 7 days late, I still want to put myself in that position because, I mean, it's nature. It's not like these deer have got a watch and a calendar. And a lot of that, even their movement during that week may very well be influenced by a front or a wind direction. So even though I'm sitting in the same tree for 5 days and then kill a buck, it may be because I finally got a west wind and that buck always comes in there on a west wind, but I don't pay any attention to that because I'm not going to kill him anywhere else anyway. So I don't want to be in a different tree. Like I've done this so long now that for me, if I'm not sitting where there's does in heat, I feel like I'm hanging and hoping no matter what sign is in the woods. Like I want to be there, even if I'm not seeing deer, I know there's a hot doe somewhere, probably within gun distance of me. You know what I mean? And at any second, something is going to happen. And the more you do it, it also builds a library, and that fixes a lot of the problems too. If you've only got one tree that you found and you've only got deer on camera for 4 days, that's great information. But in that situation, I'd sit there for 15 days in a row probably just to make sure I covered it because I didn't have anywhere else to go. But you do it for 3 years in a row, or if you've got 30 cameras, I know some guys run tons of cameras. I don't run but about 5 to 7. But if you get a bunch of information, you just want to make sure you get that information way apart from each other. I don't care if you're on 20 acres or if you're on 100,000. Don't put all your cameras on the same trail. It's not really going to benefit you in this situation. It's not going to do you any good because you're going to be hunting. You're going to be looking for the same doe estrus cycle. So you just want to put those cameras on different trails so that when you get these different dates, you're able to fill in that calendar so that you're not disappointed. If you go and sit, I mean, you may find out, if you, assuming you had the cameras still up while you were hunting, for instance, you may find out that buck come through there 2 days before you started hunting him, and he may be 4 days earlier than he was the year before. And as disappointing as that would be, it doesn't matter because tomorrow you got to go over here and hunt this giant buck for 4 days. And it keeps going. You end up with an entire season or rut cycle of a place to sit that is perfect at any given time. So, there's no 100% chance of success, but in the deer woods, man, especially hunting mature deer, if you can put yourself in a situation to where you're almost positive you're going to shoot a mature deer every year, I mean, that's as good a chance, in my opinion, as you're going to get, especially to not have to work yourself to death physically. I've had heart surgery. Like I can't just go and run up and down mountains every single day in 15-degree weather and try to work. It just don't work that way. Like I go out there and I do a lot of scouting, but I do it on my time and I do it a little bit at a time. But when you've got those dates, it gives you an outline of what to do when. And if you work full time, I mean, you don't have to worry about not being there. You can be okay with going to work when you need to. and then saving your vacation time for when you need to, instead of just taking off the week of Christmas or when everybody else does for the rut. You can say, then this tree over here is hot from November the 10th through the 15th. And there may not be anybody else that takes off that week because it ain't Thanksgiving yet. So you may be able to get the week vacation, go kill you a good buck, come back to work, and not have another buck to hunt till mid-January. You know what I mean? But if you can kill 1 or 2 a year, that's better than what most people average. And that's, to me, those odds right there are fantastic. And for somebody trying to kill their first buck that is more inexperienced, I don't think there is a better way to buck hunt, in my opinion. I don't think, because when you start getting into bed hunting, you start getting into food hunting, bow hunting. I mean, there's so many different variables that takes either a whole lot of luck or an amount of skill or experience to be able to get consistent at, especially even be successful at. Whereas a beginner, the rut to me is the easiest time to kill a big buck because he just ain't thinking right, but he's also introducing himself to new places he hasn't been all year.
Mm-hmm.
So when those big bucks show up, when people say, man, this buck ain't been on camera all year, they'll kill the biggest buck. Everybody kills out every club every year. They're like, I don't know where this deer came from. Well, they didn't have cameras up every year, but that buck come through there one time every single year from some other piece of property, and he's probably been there for 5 years. Nobody knew it because nobody ever saw him. But good example of that. I was hunting out west 3 years ago and killed a decent 8-point. And I think it was the second week in November or December. It was like December 12th or something. It was later season. And we were up there bow hunting, and it was a private farm that we were hunting. It was 1,000 acres. Well, all the deer were pretty much back on a feeding schedule. They're all just a feeding pattern. They're eating over here and they're eating over here, and there's beans and corn and whatever. Well, when we went to leave that farm, the last day we were there, we went to pull out of the driveway, and there's a giant buck standing with a doe. They're actually heading back to this little wood lot that's in the corner of the property, right at the paved road right there on the highway. Where the property cornered, there's a little block of woods over there and some cedars and stuff. And there was a doe walking toward those cedars, and he was behind her. He was probably 150-inch deer. And I was like, oh my gosh, let's stop the truck. We're sitting there looking at him out across there, and I was like, next year we come back these same dates. I said, I'm hunting that deer out there. I said, that's where I'm going to sit, is right there on 5 acres. There wasn't any, all it was cornfield except for this little block of cedars. Well, the following year, sure enough, we went back the same exact dates. Well, the day we got there was like 2 or 3 days earlier than when we had seen the deer the year before. And I just put my stand on my back. At the time, I did not have any mobile hunting set up. No saddle, no lock on, no nothing. I had a Summit Climber, and that's all I'd ever hunted out of pretty much since tree lounges. So like I'm at the mercy of these crooked trees out west, and I got a climber, so I get my bow. We got there about 1 o'clock that afternoon, and I just grabbed my stuff, and I was like, I'm going over here and going to try to hunt this. I'm just going to go see if there's any sign over there or whatever, but I'm going to go over and hunt this afternoon. So I get my bow, get my stand, and I just start walk down the driveway, go out across the cornfield. And when I get over there, and I'm assuming these deer are bedding back in here in this thicket somewhere and working their way out of the corn at night. And we caught them heading back in the mornings. That's what I'm thinking. So I get over to the edge of these cedars. There's 3 or 4 cedars this big around that are just shredded fresh. I was like, oh my gosh, he's in here. Oh my gosh. Like I'm starting to get almost nauseous, and I'm looking around trying to find a tree to get in. The trail is mud. And I've never been over here before, this spot, but there's a mud deer trail, several other rubs and scrapes, and just plain as day where this buck and doe had come from. And I'm looking, can't find a tree to get in. So there's 20 trees in there. All of them's big enough to get in, but none of them you can climb. I mean, not even close. They're crooked and sideways, got forks in them. Perfect for a mobile setup. I mean, perfect. And finally, I had to go get in a tree that was about 35 yards from the trail on the opposite side of a bunch of hedge bushes. It's got those old hedge oranges on, or hedge apples.
Yep.
Just thick, bunch of mess, Well, anyway, I climbed up, and the whole time I'm sitting there, I'm like, man, this is horrible. This is a horrible setup, but it's where I have to be. I'm looking, trying to pick holes through those hedge trees, and they got some pretty big limbs. So there's spots I can shoot. Well, it gets to be about dusk dark, and I see something coming, and it's 5 does, and they come walking straight down that trail. and they turn instead of going down that trail where all the rubs were. They come around those hedge trees, come 15 yards from me. Well, they walk by and I'm like, man, that's perfect. And it gets darker and darker. They just go over the cedars and stop and just stage up, waiting on dark. Well, I'm sitting there watching, just staring where those deer came from. And right at dark, here he comes. I just see this rack, and he's blown up to 160s, 170, biggest buck I've ever seen hunting. Comes walking down and turns and goes right behind those hedge trees, right down that trail. And I drew back, and by then, I mean, all I can see pretty much is his silhouette and his white antlers. And when he hit the hole I was wanting to shoot through, I stopped him and I shot and just heard my arrow hit. We couldn't see where it hit. The deer jumped and stopped. I was thinking, man, he don't even know he's hit, you know. He's about to go down, about to go down. Well, he starts walking, goes over to the does, and they walk out in the cornfield. And I'm just sitting there, I can't see them no more, you know, it's dark. I was like, man, what in the world happened? So I climbed down, walk over and look, my arrow's clean. There's nothing on it. So I just left it stuck in the ground. I was like, tomorrow I'll just come back in here, do the same thing again, try to figure out where I shot, like what happened. Well, the next day I get back up in the tree. Well, there's a little cedar tree between the hedge trees and where he was standing. I shot right into, but I couldn't see it because it was blended into his side because it was dust dark.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, long story short, after all this is said and done, didn't see the deer the rest of the whole week. Didn't even see the does. Probably leaving the arrow in the ground or me walking over there was probably the worst thing I could have ever done. But for whatever reason, they never did that again the rest of the whole week. I tried to hunt them every afternoon. Well, anyway, when we went to leave, there was a lady. There was a house right there on the property line. And there was a lady outside messing around in her yard. And I told my buddy, I said, hey, stop for a second. So I want to just go talk to her for just a minute. So I went over and I asked her, I said, have you seen, because where these deer came from, you could see a house like straight down 200 yards through the woods. And it looked like they came from her back door, you know, and this deer was a giant of these does. Well, I asked her, I said, have you seen a big, huge buck out here anywhere? And she said, oh, yeah. She said, we call him Big Boy. She said, he lives over here on my cornfield. I said, really? I said, do you let anybody hunt your cornfield? And she said, no. She said, I don't mind hunting. She said, but we don't let anybody hunt here. She said, my husband passed, you know, several years ago. And she said, I got a guy, the land is leased for farming, but he's not allowed to hunt it. He just comes and farms his corn here. She said, but old Big Boy lives out there in the cornfield all year long with all of his girlfriends. And she said, about this time of year, she said, he'll come up here and he'll start living right here behind my dog pen. And I said, really? And she said, yeah. I said, would you mind if I walk back there? She said, no, go ahead. Well, she had a fence behind her house, literally a chain link fence with dogs in it. And I walked behind the edge of that fence and there was a blown down tree that was giant, a huge tree. And there was a bed beside that tree trunk that was, I'm talking 350-pound deer you lay in there, and 5 other beds where them does were at. And you could see those beds from the tree I was in. How in the world they didn't see me climb that tree? And they could have the rest of the week. I don't know. But I could have, if I had looked and paid attention in a certain spot in the woods, I could have seen those deer laying there.
Wow.
And she said she said they only do it that time of the year. She said they're here for a few weeks and then they turn and they go right back out there where they always live. But that was a prime example. The following year, we went back a month early and there was no sign in there. The year after that, well, that would have been last year. I didn't end up going back because they didn't change the dates back. But that was one of those prime examples of a buck that was a giant living on a piece of unhuntable property that showed up on the huntable property for about a week and a half, 2 weeks, with his does that were in heat, and then went back. You know what I mean? And that's the only window of opportunity you've got. Like, I know those dates. I could go back right now if he's still alive, if they would just go those weeks, but I don't have permission to hunt that farm, you know, but it's one of those places that nobody understands the importance of that. And that can really come in handy on small blocks of public or private property. I mean, exactly. You can take a 10-acre piece of land and get those dates. Well, then if you get 20 10-acre pieces of land, you may have 20 dates. You may be able to go and buck out on 10-acre piece of property just by hunting them 3 or 4 days in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. There's this is a good story that you just mentioned to kind of go along with this question, but you mentioned before that you guys have 3 months of rifle season, and then you guys get to hunt the rut with a gun, at least. I don't know. You might be combining with muzzleloader and rifle and all that, but so kind of a 2-part question here. Do the deer that you see that repeat year to year, first off, typically take the exact same trail? And do you think that you'd have the same success rate if you had to worry about the wind to a much higher degree with a bow in hand and you had to be within 30 yards of these deer every time.
You definitely would. And I will play the wind regardless of the dates and where I'm going to sit. I'm going to sit in those spots. If I know those bucks are in there, those dates, I'm going to go to those spots. But after that trip up there where I couldn't get a shot, well, after messing up my shot because I didn't have a mobile set up, now I hunt out of a saddle. I've hunted out of a saddle the last 3 years. That's all I've killed all my deer out of. Because now I know where I need to be, especially based on wind. So like if I go in there and the wind is doing a certain thing, I'll just go to the other side of the trail. You know what I mean? I'm still hunting the same spot, but I'm just going to hunt it different based on that day and what's going on that day. I won't stick to the same tree necessarily. As long as I know where I need to shoot, I'll just jump to the other side of that trail. But I'm also a big believer that as long as you can get a good crosswind or something like that, that's why I like hunting trails, because if you can follow a trail across any piece of property, usually it will have enough bends in it to where you can get a good north-south cross across that trail instead of your scent blowing down that trail, and you can hunt almost on it. That way, by the time the deer get to you, there's either a very good chance you're either going to shoot them or they may not pick you out, because your scent's just blowing. And you can keep it as long as it's fairly consistent, you can keep it from blowing across the trail. And you certainly don't want it blowing down it if you've got an option. But that, to me, a good east to west section of trail is a good place to key in on, at least down here where we've got most of the time you're going to have a north wind, occasionally south early season, but usually down here it's going to be a north wind. But with the thermals and the mountains and stuff, if you're hunting hill country, every spot you go to is different. It just depends on how the air is moving when you get in there. So it's nice to have either some kind of mobile setup or just hunt from the ground at that point. I said, I'm not anti-climber by any means now, but I have not hunted out of one in 3 years because of that. Having to used to I'd find sign and then look for the tree that I had to hunt. Whereas now I'll find the sign and figure out where I need to be to shoot that deer. And you just go get there. Even if it means hunting from the ground.
Yeah. You're hunting deer, not trees.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
2 of the 8 points I killed last year was from the ground. For that exact reason. I went in there and it wasn't going to work out those days where I needed to be with the way the wind was moving. So I just sat down. I just put all my pack, my stuff on the ground and just sat down beside it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I unfortunately have to hop off here. I got a hard stop coming up in like a minute here. But It's been a pleasure to get to talk to you, Daniel. Josh,
absolutely, man. Yes, sir.
As well. I really, really look forward to employing a bunch of these strategies.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I've tried using it like historical data throughout the season, but maybe not quite to this level of detail. And I think it's going to help a lot. So,
Well, good luck to you.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks for hopping on, Jacob. Have fun at work.
Yeah. Enjoy.
All right. So we'll continue this conversation because I've written down a bunch of things.
Absolutely.
As far as questions and stuff to bring up. Like I said earlier, when I first heard you talk about all this information, it lined up almost to a T with what I had experienced and what I had seen. There's a piece of property I hunt in Ohio. It's my father's property. It's just a small 23 acres. They got it in actually it was right at the beginning of deer season of 2019 because I killed a buck off of it then. That one was November 7th is when I killed. No, maybe it was November 9th. But anyway, I've ran trail cameras on this property since 2019. And I had walked the property and found an area of like condensed sign where there was old rubs and some scrapes and stuff. And that first year I hung a camera there. And in Ohio, we're allowed to bait, and that's how I used to primarily hunt. Back in that's how my father still kind of hunts. But so we put corn there, and October 25th of that first year, there was I couldn't exactly tell what it was, but there was a very big body buck. I could tell, big rack running past the camera, chasing a doe. And I took note of that. Like I said, I killed a buck in there a couple weeks later. Fast forward to 2020. I killed a 2020? Yeah. I killed a 142-inch 9-pointer on October 30th. The following year, 21, I killed a buck think that was the buck I had named Charlie. He had like a unicorn point coming out of his forehead. I want to say it was October 27th when I shot him. So that third year going in, I was kind of going back through the pictures and started noticing at least a mature buck was coming through towards those last like 5 days of October. In 22, I messed up. I got too aggressive on a buck that I was after. I didn't kill. I actually blew him out of there. And I hunted the same time frames. I think I went in on October 25th in the morning, and I blew him out, and I just never got back on him. I think I was too aggressive and hunted it too much, and he would just not like 70 yards off the property line, and he just was going around me on the neighbors. But it's just been very consistent year after year. In 2023, same thing. Mature bucks were in there the last week of October. Last year, like the story I brought up earlier, I got on probably mid 140s 10 pointer that I was chasing. First daylight picture, or first time I had seen him in daylight, was on October 24th, but I went in there because of that cold front. And I knew based on my trail camera data and from hunting it previous years, I didn't have a lot of time to get things done on him, because from what I've gathered was there was a doe group in there, and at least one of them would come into Estrus somewhat early. Based on, all the way in 2019, where I had that buck chasing a doe on camera on October 25th. The one I actually killed in 2020, he was chasing a doe. That was October 30th. And then those bucks the following year, same thing. They were following a doe group. So that's what this buck last year was doing as well. I actually had, the first time I saw him on October 24th, he followed these two does onto the neighbors, probably about 80 yards. But I had three other encounters with him over, let's see, so that was the 24th, and I want to say it was the 26th and 27th. Maybe it was 28th and 29th. It was that following weekend, because I think the 24th was a weekday. But I had three other encounters with him, and each time he was following that doe group in there. Twice I ran out of light in the evening. Like, I drew back on him at 25 yards, and I couldn't even see my pins. And then one other encounter was in the morning. A small buck had come in and was pushing a doe around me, and that buck, I could hear him coming from a ways away, stomping through the woods, and he ended up pushing that buck off the doe. And it was in the morning. We had just gotten into the legal light, so I had just had enough light to shoot. And again, 25 yards, I drew. It was dead calm. I don't know if they caught movement out of the corner eye or just heard me draw my bow back, trotted off, and chance again. But I stopped hunting that area. I think October 31st was like the last day I was in there. And I was like, well, based on all of my information over the years and all the trail cam data, I need to move on. There'll probably be some other bucks in there, but not any of the mature ones I'm after. So I gave myself a dead stop, stopped hunting, and moved on to different properties to hunt. And I had never got that buck on camera again. Well, actually, the day I stopped, he was on camera once at night. I've never seen him again since. So going back to what you were saying as far as those date ranges, I do put a lot of credence in those if you have the information. But you had said something earlier that I want to bring up that I think is very important. And what I have learned utilizing this historical data is you really need to get out in front of these bucks. Like, if you're waiting on a daylight picture, you're too
That's
late.
the most important. That's the most important part of it. Yeah, you're right.
If you wait until you see them on camera that year, you're out of the game, in my opinion. So
I think that's where everybody's put themselves at a severe disadvantage with cell cameras, is they've gotten to where they're depending on that picture for confirmation they need to hunt. And so many times it's the only one you get. And then, I mean, after that, you're at the mercy of 365 days till he does it again. It's, in a deer's lifespan, that's a long time.
Yes. Yeah. And you had alluded to that earlier, and I wanted to bring that up because I feel like a lot of hunters get caught in that. Like, oh, I'm not going to go in there until like I get them on camera. And I feel like some hunters that may try and utilize this information as part of their hunting strategy, they may get caught in that of just like waiting until they get them on camera, especially with cell cameras. But I think your contention, my contention is you need to get those date ranges and be in there before that buck gets in there.
Right. Right.
That is exactly what I've learned. I think what you've been talking about as well is in anticipating them being there and catching them when they come in.
Well, it's kind of like finding sign. I mean, they're if you can get on a scrape that's just been made and that buck's checking it the next day or whatever, then that's well and good. But as far as fresh scrapes go, you're hunting bucks, not scrapes. It's kind of one of those things. It's like by the time the scrape's there, the buck's not. The scrape's already been made. So it's kind of cool if you can be there before he makes the scrape and stand there, and shoot him when he's about to make it.
Yeah.
Because and it kind of goes back to woodsmanship and growing up hunting without cameras and stuff too. There's a lot of benefit to learning kind of why bucks do what they do other than just knowing where they are. And I don't think a lot of people think about that nowadays because they have so much access to know where they are between drones and cameras and everything else. It's easy to find a buck, but it's amazing to me how many people can find a good buck and can never kill one, and having all the information. And it's because they're waiting on that confirmation that deer's there, knowing that he's going to be, especially if they've got years worth of data. They just never thought about it before. They've never put the data together and been like, oh, well, he's usually here now. You just wait on him to show up, but I've had a lot of people in my taxidermy shop. It's like I tell people before, it doesn't do me any good to give people bad information because I'm a taxidermist.
Yeah.
What I mean?
Exactly.
I need people to kill big deer.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of people that have been frustrated and been like, man, I haven't been able to do this or haven't been able to kill a good buck. I've killed these, but I've never killed a good one. And it's like, well, where's your pictures at? Like, I mean, if you don't mind me looking, let me see your map. Like, let me see where these pictures are at, what the deer's doing, what time of the year it is. And then it's just like, all you got to do this next season is just go and sit right here on these dates. And it's like, yeah, but we've got a box down here, we've got a ladder over here, and there's not anywhere to put a stand. It's like, deer are not going to go where you want to put your stand. Like you just need to take a gun in there to where the deer's standing, and it's kind of a different way of thinking, but it goes back to people aren't taught by elderly folks. They weren't taught by their granddad and their dad of what you got to do. Like growing up, man, you were told that it was impossible to kill a trophy buck. What you were doing was the impossible. You were trying to outsmart the smartest animal in the entire world, and it was undoable. And everybody would have one deer on their wall in a lifetime, and you spend every day trying to figure out why or what that deer was doing. And it just never worked. You know what I mean? Like you just spent hours and hours and hours because you didn't have any information. And there again, the information was there then. It was just from past years, and nobody ever thought about those dates. You just knew that the last week of January in South Alabama was the rut. So you went down there, and they just say you're better off being in a tree down there during the last week of January than being somewhere else. But being in the wrong tree is being in the wrong tree. I don't care bow season or rut. If the deer, just because there's sign there don't mean there's bucks there right then.
Yep.
And just because there's does there don't mean there's bucks there right then. That's why I don't really, people talk about trying to find does and hunting does when it's the rut. Well, you can sit there and watch a group of does eat every single day, and there ain't no bucks after them. And people, that's when they say, well, it's been a weak rut this year. These does aren't even breeding. So no, they probably bred three weeks ago or a month and a half ago. I mean, they may be going into estrus in November when you think they're going into estrus in January just because you saw deer over here in January, chasing. And it'll surprise people if they start relating their buck pictures to estrus cycles. When it's not pre-rut, post-rut. When bucks leave that summering area, when they leave that core area they live during the summer and start traveling, it's all rut related. All they're doing is traveling for estrus cycles. I mean, everything they do the whole year, unless they're on food or bedding, everything they do is based on breeding during deer season. So always assume if you've got bucks on camera in a specific period of time, it's because of a doe, regardless of the rumors for the area, regardless of what people tell you about the date ranges of the rut. Like, forget about all of that. Just worry about that 3-day estrus cycle and why those bucks are in that spot in front of that camera for those dates. And it's going to be because of estrus.
Question with the trail cameras. I don't know if you leave your cameras out at this time of year. Jacob and I have had this conversation before on this podcast when we were talking with Luke Resop, and he's talked about some of the GPS data does kind of back up this claim as far as some bucks. I've noticed this anecdotally. Like some bucks seem to do like this excursion within their home range like a couple months before pre-rut or rut. So some of the bucks I mentioned earlier that I killed, right? I would get those bucks on camera early August. And it's been a little different the past couple of years. I think I've had some neighbors come in and change some habitat, put food plots and stuff in. So things have changed a little bit. But for those first 3 years, I could say, okay, this week in August, there will be a mature buck that pops up on camera somewhere on the property. Typically it'd be like a salt block, mineral block or something. He'd be there for that one time, maybe twice, wouldn't see him again until that last week of October. And that was the time to kill him. So it almost was like these bucks were coming into an excursion and kind of checking on the doe groups that were there. It's like, all right, is Sally still
checking
around?
the locals. Yeah.
Yeah. Sally's still around here. Do I still need to come here and during the rut and meet up with Sally at this time frame? And Jacob has talked about that before too. He's noticed some of that. And it kind of corresponded. You had said this earlier, where a buck would, I think it was on that 3,500 acres. At one time frame, he was on the west side, right? And then another time frame, he was on the east side. And I'm trying to remember, actually, this might be a podcast that comes out in a few weeks. Jacob and I talked with Dr. Diefenbach about doe behaviors during the rut. And Jacob had brought the same topic of these buck excursions early in the year of a particular buck that popped up in one of the areas he had done an excursion early in the year. He was there during a certain time frame, but then later in the year, he was in a different area with a different doe group that he had also done an excursion on. So my question is, are you seeing the same thing, or do you have cameras out?
Absolutely. Just specifically to that, what I have noticed on my camera footage, especially being able to hunt public land where it's kind of like infinite land boundaries, where I can go where I want to go. There will be places where I get pictures of bucks. I mean, I may have 10 different bucks on camera, but the biggest one may be 115 inches. And then there may be other places where I only get 2 bucks on camera all year long. And only like one of them may be a 150-inch deer. It comes through one time. And the other one may be a 6-point that comes through there 4 times. And what I have kind of noticed is those areas that have got either a whole bunch of does in them or places that are safe. Like say you've got a piece of land that is no trespassing, no deer hunting, no nothing, where those deer are kind of safe. Those bucks, a lot of times there will be at least one specific buck that will not hardly leave. He'll kind of stay around even from bow season to through the rut. Everything else, it's like he's safe there and he doesn't really do a lot of traveling. And that, I don't know if that's part of their personality or something that they learned when they were young and what their dads did and everything else. But what I do know is all of the really big bucks that I've had on camera are the singles. They're the ones that come through one time and you don't see them the rest of the year. And I believe the reason is all of these places where bucks stay, they keep putting down sign and putting down sign and putting down sign. They end up on camera over and over and over. They get killed. They don't move much and they're predictable. People get them on camera on their cell cams and they go in there and sit and the buck shows back up 2 days later, which is more of a little local situation. And in those areas, I don't get near as many pictures of really big deer, really old deer. Yeah. It's just kind of places you can go kill a buck every year, but it's just not going to be the same as those bucks that you get a picture of once on the side of whatever, the side of a hill or the side of a swamp that's just a buck trail, and that one big one comes by there once a year on those dates. And I think they just get big because everybody that finds that sign is hunting behind him. I don't think he ever stops. I think he makes that excursion and everybody knows he's there. They've all got his picture and they've all see these giant rubs in the woods, but he's left. By the time the hunters, there'd be 50 people hunting that deer, and he's passed every single one of them. And he just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then somebody finds a deadhead in the woods and he's 200 inches. You know, it's like, where was this deer at? And it's like, he was there a week ago and a week ago and a week ago and a week ago. You know, he was just, and that's, you know, I personally have not found any of these giant deer that are over 150, 160 inches, but the 150s, 160s I'm getting pictures of, every single one of them are one-time deer. They're coming through there. And a lot of it too is, it's kind of weird. I'm assuming it's either the 28-day estrus cycle, you know, when they don't get bred, or a different doe from the group that's got a different estrus cycle. But sometimes you'll have a week where there may be 6 or 8 bucks show up, and all of them are 2-year-olds or 1-year-old, just immature, you know, young deer. And then all of a sudden this giant shows up 2 weeks later for 3 days in a row. You're in the middle of the day, your daylight. And there's no doubt in my mind that deer is there because he knows a hot doe is there those dates. And I think all the other deer know that there's a doe there the other dates, and they just either know each other or whatever, but they come and they go, and they're never on camera again. And all of a sudden this big one shows up for a few days, and then he's gone. And I had one really big 8-point do that last year. And in that same spot, about a mile from there, it was the same situation. I had a really big 10-point that showed up those same dates, the later dates, about 3 weeks late than when all of the little bucks showed up. Which, like I said, a lot of times the big deer show up first, but I think it's just for that specific estrus cycle. I think where those big deer coming in there, I don't know that any of the young bucks even know there's a doe in there in heat. No. I don't know if she just comes in late, or if those bucks just know to be there after those does that haven't gotten bred yet. Maybe there's several does in the area that don't all get bred. And it could even be places that's fairly close to their summer area where they've got, because there's a lot of thicket over there, stuff like that. And they may just be returning from their excursion and breeding the does that are left over as they get closer back to their, you know, summering area.
Yeah. I think those real big older bucks are just very efficient with their movement.
Yeah, and they already know. They've got history themselves. They know where they want to go before the other bucks even know there's a doe in heat. I think they're heading to a place expecting a doe to breed.
Yeah. Like, I think Jacob brought it up earlier, but their nose, it's hard for us to comprehend like how good their nose is. And there's an example of like how dogs can tell time. It's by their nose and by the scent dissipation within like a room. That's how they know to expect like their owner to come home. Well, I think there might be something similar with deer, because even if you look at the GPS data, when these bucks make these transitions, the ones that do make these big excursions between like their summer range and their fall range, right? When they typically move, it's almost within the same time frame. Like we've talked with Luke Reese up here, like it was like same day, almost same time at times. And it's like, well, how does that deer know?
Yeah.
How like they don't have a calendar, they don't have a clock. Like how in the world do they know? Just like, oh, yep, it's time to go and move. And year after year after year, it's almost the exact same. But so in my head, it makes sense if you get an older deer, like they are so well in tune with their environment and with the social structure of the deer in the area and the other deers in the area, the other, you know, does and bucks in the area, that when they make their movements during the, you know, pre-rut and rut, it would be efficient. They already have an idea of where they need to go, and it's a breeding purposes, right? So,
and those are that same idea could even carry into pressure. You know, when it comes to human scent, trucks, stuff like that, because something else that I've done for about the last 10 years is I'll get in my tree stand like 3:30 in the morning. So like, especially hunting public land, a lot of people get there at 5 o'clock. That's that's when people get to the woods, is 5 to 5:30. And if you get up in your tree about 3:30, you don't really realize, even as a human, how much you can hear in perfect silence in a tree in the middle of nowhere.
Yep.
But the first person that gets there early, like let's say it's 4 o'clock, you'll hear gravel popping, and that truck may be 5 miles away, and you can hear that. You know there's a truck. You can't hear the engine, but you know there's a truck. And if I can hear it, you know every deer can hear it. But then as it gets to be 4:30, 5 o'clock, 5:15, all of a sudden it's like a highway. There's so many trucks driving, and you're not even close to a road, but it's almost overwhelming the amount of sound based on compared to 2 hours ago. And what I've noticed is those deer, when you hear that first gravel pop, that second gravel pop, you hear them start to move, and they'll come up from these bottoms and just get on the trail you're hunting. I don't know how many times I've been sitting there and heard a deer walk up and just stop, and you just sit there for an hour waiting on daylight to be able to see what it is, and it won't even move. It'll just walk up there and just stand there. But they hear the trucks coming in there, and they're like, okay, time to go.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and they're not getting spooked. They're not getting bumped. They just know the people are coming, so they're leaving. And that same thing, like I said, with the scent thing, if somebody was, I mean, a lot of the mature bucks that I've found end up somewhere pretty close to where somebody's either hunting or traveling or parking. And I think they just kind of do it on purpose to keep a watch on everybody. And they're just got that edge over some of the other bucks. And they know that kind of one of the things like keep your enemy close, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah,
like if they know where you're at, they've got a better odds. And I think a lot of that is just scent left over. You know, somebody comes in there. I mean, even right now, you go in there to hang your cameras, you go in there for preseason scouting, whatever you want to do. That buck comes through there and smells that. He's like, all right, time to go 4 miles over here. You know, it wouldn't surprise me a bit if he just didn't decide, all right, well, there's that, because I dealt with that last year, the year before, the year before. You know, it would make sense.
Yeah. They are so good at avoiding pressure. I mean, again, we've had, I can't remember if it was Luke or Dr. Bronson Strickland, but we've discussed, it was Dr. Bronson Strickland last year with their buck movement study, but how the deer will navigate the human pressure. Right? They may not go far. Some of them will. I'm sure that depends on their personality, but other ones, and I've noticed this on Pressure Public, they may not go far. They may just go in these areas like you were talking about earlier, like the areas in between of pressure where they know they're not being bothered, or they know, oh, no human usually comes here, I'm fine right here. And sometimes that could be a couple 100 yards. I mean, they're just so good at avoiding the pressure. And I've had instances over the past couple of years where I thought I was out of the game on deer, and I go check a camera that's on a ridge over, and it's like, oh, well, they were just over here.
Just watching you come in every day.
Yeah. They'll make you feel like a dummy quick.
Yeah. A great way to find a buck. Matter of fact, a lot of the scouting that I do, where I'm going to put my cameras, if I can ever get in a place where there is, like, say, a scrape or some really good sign in an area where I know people are probably going to be, like, let's say it's in the middle of a thermal hub, you got a big giant community scrape, and I mean, there's 2 or 3 game cameras up, you know, watching everything. Well, if you can get somewhere where you can see all of that, then inevitably there's going to be a trail there or a bed. You know what I mean? And it's going to be in a place, maybe 200 yards on a point, or it may be somewhere really weird. But if you can look down through the woods and be like, from right here, if I was standing right here and a buck was right there, he could see me and stay as far away as possible. And you can walk to that spot, and a lot of times it will put you on buck sign. And I think that's what they do a lot of times is they, you know, if they just took off running and just ran in one straight line, every one of them would be dead.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they do kind of like when you used to run dogs. You send the dogs in the woods, the deer just go around them. They send the does and just keep on going. The dogs get on the does, and the big buck would just circle back around, get back behind the hunter, and just stand there. you know?
Yep.
And I think that's the same thing they do. I think they just, like you said, they'll just go around the side of a hill, and I think they'll either listen, smell, or watch, and just let you go by. You know, as long as they don't let you know they're there, then they know where you're at. They ain't worried about it because they see what you're doing.
Yep. The more I scout on pressured pieces of public, the more I'm convinced that some of them will just hunker down in thickets and they'll let you walk right by them.
Yep.
That's because I'll get deer on camera. It's like, I know I've been all around this area. Like, how have I not seen this deer in person, or at least bumped them or jumped them or something? And I've had bucks that, heck, didn't get out of their bed. Like, I was An example would be this place I hunt in Kentucky. There's a ridge with a select cut. One side of the hill is pretty thick, and I've gotten, heck, 10, 15 yards from a deer I didn't know was there because of how thick it was. But he let me get that close before he even hopped up out of his bed and took off. Scared the daylights out of me. So I didn't know he was there.
Yeah, I killed a 10-point when I was young. That was the first deer that I ever killed that changed the way I thought about just going and getting in a tree where you could see everything. Because, used to, we'd find sign and stuff, but if you found a scrape line and rub line, like say through a little wood lot in between a couple of cutovers, well, you just went and climbed the tallest tree on the cutover. That way you could see the entire cutover. You didn't necessarily hunt that trail so much as got where you could see wherever that buck was at.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, it was coming a flood one morning, bad thunderstorm. We slept in till about 6 o'clock. And I drove the four-wheeler in and started walking down this long, muddy road. And there was a pine thicket that met the road. As the whole road just about was cutovers, different ages of cutover, thick stuff. And I got this one pine thicket that the trees had gotten up big enough to where you could see through them and shoot. But you couldn't get up more than about 10 feet and you couldn't see the ground. It was probably 8 years old, maybe. And right when I got to the edge of those pines that I cut over, a 10-point, real pretty deer jumped up and just took off running. And I was like, dang, I couldn't get on him. He got in that thicket. I was like, man, what in the world? And my stand was right on the other side of that cutover. He was running straight toward it. And I was thinking, man, if I had just been here when it was raining, he would have probably walked right to me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I saw in the mud right there where he had come across the road before I jumped him. And there was a trail, just a mud trail that went right into those pines. It went from pines to pines before it was about 10 feet from the edge of that cutover inside those pines. And I was like, well, he might have come by me, but he was on this trail right here. Where does this thing go? And so I just ease over there. Now I just put eyes on this nice buck. So, I know where he was standing, but it's never where I ever would have hunted at the time,
Yeah.
I'm just like, where's he going? So I go walking up in there and there's like 20 huge scrapes going up through this pine thicket, a bunch of tore up trees and stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just need to somehow hunt here, so I went back to camp and got my dad's old man. He had an old man climber up under his camper. And that next morning I went in that pine thicket and got in one of the little bitty pines and just climbed up about 8 foot and was sitting there watching that trail. And at 15 till 7, here comes that 10-point, walked straight across the road. I watched him cross the road. I wasn't 20 yards from the four-wheeler trail. He walked across the road, walked straight down that trail, and I shot him at like 5 yards. And I was just sitting there thinking, that was so easy. Like all I had to do was the obvious thing that made perfect sense. And if it had been a day before and I'd seen those tracks, I would have gotten my climber on the backside of that cutover and thought, hopefully that buck will come across this cutover today.
Mm-hmm.
And probably never even seen him. He'd probably come out there every day I was ever sitting there.
Yeah.
But that was just one of those, this is one of those situations that just shows you when you find a buck, he's there for a reason and you need to hunt there, like right there. Like no matter, I don't care if you can see your truck, as long as it's legal to be in that spot, you need to hunt him right there, no matter how little sense it makes, at least to you. And the more you do it, it starts making perfect sense. You start realizing that all these bucks are doing is surviving. They're just staying away from wherever the people are at. And that if the people are 2 miles in, they may be 50 yards from the road or vice versa. It just depends on the situation.
Yep. I have found the best thing to do is just keep an open mind. And when you, like you said, when you see those bucks do something or have like a high fidelity for a certain area, or you bump them, there's nothing I like more now. I used to have the thought of this, it was something awful to do to bump a buck out of a bed. Now if I'm scouting, that's what I'm trying to do. Because once I see him,
trying to put eyes on him.
Yeah, once I get eyes on him and know where he likes to be, that is a world of information right there. Then, like you said, you're like, all right, why is he here? Why does this make sense for him to be here? And a lot of times, it comes back to that's where they're comfortable. That's where they know that they can survive or feel safe.
Yeah, it's just where there's nobody. And sometimes it is a 5-acre thicket, 100 yards from the truck or 100 yards from the gate. Those are great places to go look. And those bucks just, they ain't got nothing to be scared of. Ain't nobody hunting right there.
Yep. Yep. There are places, the place I hunt in, that I like to hunt in Kentucky. Last October, and I have a camera there this year, just trying to get that second year of information on the small little ridge that comes off of like this road. If you walk down the road, it's real thick on top, like no one's going in there. But about middle of the ridge to like kind of the lower third, there's some scrapes there. And I found it postseason scouting one year, and I hung some cameras on it. And heck, I had at least two shooter bucks in daylight the second week of October in there often. And this is 150 yards from the road. I know people are walking past it all the time. And there was a third shooter buck. I didn't get him in there as daylight as much. He popped up one time in daylight, but I had a camera a ridge over that was easier to access from that road. And I had only gotten those bucks on that camera about 2 or 3 weeks later, 2 weeks later, because it was towards the end of October, and it was only in the middle of the night. And I thought I was quite a ways away from their core area. Right. Well, as a crow's flight, those cameras were only 225, 250 yards apart. So it was another eye-opening moment of like, oh, like why are they here in daylight?
I did the same thing last year, very similar. There was a spot. I usually don't put two cameras very close to each other, not even on the same road, just looking for. But I've got so many dates now to where I don't really have to do a lot more scouting unless I just enjoy it, so I like to go find something new. But I just decided I had found some really good sign and decided to go in and put a camera on it. So I went in there, put a camera up, and according to the topography, I'm thinking, okay, these deer are coming up right here. It was like a bluff gap and then a ridge. And then you had like a big, like a ridge system that went around this big head of a creek. And I was like, those bucks, they're probably coming up right here, coming around the edge of this creek, checking does, whatever. So these spots, like you said, they might have been a quarter mile apart, something like that. And I was like, I'm going to go over here and put another camera up on that, or just see if there's any sign over there. So I went over there. Well, sure enough, there was one scrape. There was no other sign. There was one scrape and a little rub right beside that scrape. And I was like, well, I'm just going to stick a camera here just to confirm, like, see if it's some of the same bucks. Well, I went and checked that camera. It was this last year, those two cameras, and had a really nice 9-point and a couple of young bucks that were coming up that bluff gap. And they were there consistently. I mean, for 2 weeks, they were coming up there every other day. I guess they were just coming up from the bottom and bedding. This was during bow season. This was, kind of pre-rut. Well, then when the rut got started, like a month and a half later, 5 or 6 bucks showed up on that other camera, and none of them were the same deer. And a few of them were better deer than I had on the other camera. And I mean, the thing is there's sign connecting the two. Like there's rubs, there's scrapes. Like if you go from one side to the other, but I don't know if it was a couple, we've talked about how those rut loops, sometimes they'll connect, and it may just be probably different families of bucks, that have grown up together. And I'm assuming that that's just what that is. So what I'm trying to do this year is find that intersection where sign turns into sign, where I thought it was a trail. I think it's actually 2 loops. And if I can find that intersection, I believe I'll be able to hunt every single buck that comes down either direction.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm going to put. I got to put some cameras in there again this year. It's one of the first times I've ever done that. But it just makes perfect sense. Right where that middle area is it's old beetle kill. There's a bunch of old dead logs. It's just a thick, nasty bunch of mess. I don't even know how they can travel it hardly. So I don't know if they're bedding in it and kind of working their way out. But you'd think that if they were all bedding in there, then you'd get pictures of the same ones on both places, but you just don't. And the thing is too, is you're looking at a place that'd be great during bow season, and then a place that'd be great during the rut. That's not a quarter mile away from each other.
Yep.
But there's not deer on camera any other dates.
Yeah, I was trying to look up how far this is. There's that same place in Kentucky. I've been spreading my cameras out, and I do like the strategy you just talked about finding where all that sign, where it could be those potential different loops that are meeting location. Because there was a big drainage system I had a camera on. Let's see here how far this is. And it was not far by any means. So that spot I was just talking about with those bucks on that little ridge. 0.67 miles. So
Yeah, just
half
over half a mile. Yeah.
So those bucks in that area were never on this other camera I had. We're just over half a mile away. But there was, now I don't think I'm going to hunt that spot because everything was at night. I think I need to move it. But
Right.
the bucks that were on that camera, there was three different shooters that were on that one that were never on my other ones that were
Right.
less than half a mile away. So like you said, that begs the question, like, is there an area where a lot of this intersects, or where they will meet up, or is there a common area where you can target all of them at once?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those areas like that, like I found 2 of them so far, and that's where I've killed 4 of my bucks the last 2 years, is where several loops all intersect.
Yep.
And it's like dynamite. I mean, you'll sit up there and see 6 or 7 bucks, in a 3 or 4 day period. I mean, they're just in there everywhere, either chasing a doe or looking for a doe, and they're coming from different directions. There's just bucks coming from everywhere, and it's exciting, especially, when you got places with low deer density. You could potentially not see anything. But what's crazy is you put a camera up like that for the first time in one of those spots, and you might get 15 bucks on camera in a 7 to 10 day period, but you may not have a deer on camera the rest of the entire year. Not a doe, not a yearling. I mean, there's just nothing there. And it can be so discouraging for somebody that didn't know what they were doing to sit, I mean, for weeks at a time. And you look at Pablo Escobar, for instance, my buddy, like that dude hunted for man, I think it was like 5, 6 years before he ever even killed a deer, before he ever even saw a deer. He'd never even seen one in the woods. And I'm like, man, you talking about dedication. Like, I start getting a little antsy if I ain't seen a buck in 3 or 4 weeks during the rut, something's wrong.
Yeah.
But it would be tough to have to sit in a place. And I think that happens a lot too on private land. A lot of people that are not real big deer hunters, or just starting to get into it, hunt, like, say their granddad's 40 acres, stuff like that. And they want to get into it and they want to try it, but they go and they go and they go and they go and they just aren't successful. And if they just knew that they could go during this 1 week and see everything they're going to see all year, then it would save them a whole lot of, not just save them a whole lot of time and heartache, but also give them an opportunity to go and scout elsewhere and go find a place where they could see deer during all those blank spots, when the deer are not in their other place. I think that's one of the huge advantages of it too, is it gives you that opportunity to, whether you're a private land or public land hunter, either way, it gives you the opportunity to move to complete different areas and pieces of property and just figure out when those dates are. And as long as they don't overlap, I mean, you're always in the game.
Yeah.
You're putting yourself in front of hot does all the time. And it's something that everybody waits 1 week a year for every year. And I do it 3 months. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's just, there's a lot of opportunity there that people are missing out on. They're just doing a lot of sitting for absolutely no reason.
No,
And
I
think
definitely agree. We're coming up on 2 hours here. I want to be cognizant of your time, our listeners' time, and I need to leave here soon to get my little boy from daycare.
Right.
But if you had to tie a bow on everything for anyone that's listening, as far as the strategy goes, what would be kind of your elevator statement, so to speak, as far as like how to go about things and then how they can apply it to their strategy?
Right. If somebody come up to me and ask me right now, how can I kill a buck this season? First thing I'd tell them is, wherever it is that you're hunting, find any information you can on the bucks in the area. Whether it be if you've hunted there, if your friends have hunted there, families hunted there, hunting club information, anything you can find out, because right now you can't do postseason scouting from last year. It's too late. But preseason scouting, if you can find a rub line, if you've got information on when those bucks were there, find the dates. If you can figure out the specific dates that bucks were killed on a piece of property that you have access to hunt, figure out when those dates are and be there, those dates. Like, that's going to be your best bet of hunting that property the entire season. So that's what I would focus on, is if you're at work and have to get off or whatever you need to do, I would focus on those dates. And I would 100% always have a camera in your backpack, have it loaded with fresh batteries and a blank SD card. And this time of year, whether you're hunting or scouting, if you find a rub line, put a camera on it. Just put up a camera and turn it on. Put it on video mode and turn it on and run it during the season. Because the worst regret you're going to have when the season ends and you've been unsuccessful again, if you don't do that now, even though 2 years seems like a long time to have to wait, when the season's over and you hadn't killed a deer, then you got 2 more years to wait, is the way I look at it. You know what I mean? If you don't ever get ahead of it, you're always going to be behind it. So, I mean, I guess that would be my number one piece of advice is go ahead and do the slow and steady wins the race and start your camera work now and plan on starting to kill every year starting 2 years from now. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That way, I mean, you're going to be better off than every year trying to figure them out while the season's going on. There's too much going on. Too many plans, too much work.
Yes, exactly. I 100% agree. So, and to kind of go off of that a little bit for our listeners. So, and I've said this before, I really like early season now. And before we started to hit record, I told you about that encounter with that target I had this season, opening day at Kentucky. Although I've scouted and done everything to try and get on that deer in the early season, I have still tried to lay the groundwork for either that fall, the next fall, the fall after, because I still have SD cameras on different areas. So like you said, like those scrape lines or those, so the rub lines or scrape lines, and that I'll just leave an SD camera on all year. And then at the end of the season, I'll collect it and gather the information. That way I'm ahead of the game for years to come. So I do that. I've done it the past 2 years on this particular place in Kentucky that I've been hunting in. There's a place in Ohio that I like to hunt as well that I've started that work this year too. So
it's a better feeling to know where you're sitting is the right place, even if you're unsuccessful, than to go and be unsuccessful. Because I may not kill a deer for the next 5 years, but it's not because I'm in the wrong place. You know what I mean? Like knowing you're in the right tree is 99% of the mental battle. You know, and being able to tell yourself, be confident. Once you find this information out, being able to be confident and do not move. Just get in the tree and stay there. Don't go looking around. You know, don't think the deer are somewhere else. Like they're close. They're just, you just hadn't seen them yet. You know, you just got to hunt it and trust that process.
Yep, I agree. Well, Daniel, where can people find you? Find out everything you do.
Cedar Ridge Chronicles on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. I'm on all of that. So my phone number's on pretty much everything and
all the social medias.
All the social medias. Yep. Cedar Ridge Chronicles.
Well, with that, Daniel, thank you very much for your time today.
I appreciate
this has been a great conversation. I think going back to the topic of those circuits and where they intersect, I think maybe next season we'll get you and Jake Booth on together and have a discussion about those those circuits.
Jake scored my buck last year. Me and him had a lot of conversations about that stuff. He's awesome.
Yeah. We've talked to him about those buck circuits as well. I think that would be a fantastic conversation to have. But with that, this has been the Mobile Hunter Podcast, and this is the Whitetail Apprentice Series. I've been your host, Josh Luck. We were joined by our co-host, Jacob Sklenar, and our guest today was Mr. Daniel Williams. Everyone, have a good one.